Hi all, let's have a look at an amazing classic game called the Immortal Zugzwang game. We have visited this game before in the distant past. Let's revisit it again. So Friedrich Saemisch was playing with the white pieces against Aron Nimzowitsch. This was played in Copenhagen 1923. Nimzowitsch was one of the leading hypermodernists. They used to find the very useful exceptions to the established theory. They loved challenging the theory at the time, and so extending it as well. They had a very useful role for the evolution of chess style. So this game, 1923, just to set the scene here, this is an all-play-all tournament played in the capital of Denmark, Copenhagen. Nimzowitsch had just returned to international chess play after a long absence. So his new home city of Copenhagen, Denmark, he met 3 other masters and 2 Danish players for a double round robin tournament held from March 3rd to the 14th in 1923. So this was a fertile period in the hypermodern school. His style shone brilliantly, according to ChessGames.com. And he actually won this tournament a full 2 points ahead of the rest of the field. And this was the Brilliancy Prize game we're about to witness. Okay, so the Immortal Zugzwang game. D4 from Friedrich. We have knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3. So Friedrich is avoiding the Nimzo-Indian of Nimzowitsch by not playing knight c3. How annoying is that? So we're in Queen's Indian territory. So b6. We have g3, bishop b7, bishop g2. So quite fancy fianchettos, which in eras past, they weren't so popular to fianchetto your bishops, but they're all the rage now in the 1920s. With the hypermoderns. So bishop e7, knight c3, both sides castle, d5. Now this next move, Nimzowitsch is a little bit critical of, potentially. I think it's really the follow-up which makes it a problem. Knight e5, it does pin the d5 pawn to the bishop, and also by liberating this bishop, it does actually mean e4 could be on the cards as well sometimes, especially exacerbated after Nimzowitsch's move c6. He described this as safeguarding his position. Yes, he has actually got notes on this game if you want to check those out at ChessGames.com. There's actually notes by Nimzowitsch himself. Now you'll see that this move, by contrast to the other knight move, blocks in the bishop, and actually it stops controlling e4. And actually, if white played his cards right, maybe e4 is the best move here, now that bishop's blocked, to just get this in. For example, d takes, knight takes. This leads to quite a pleasant position for white. Here, white has a small edge. If we try and parry that with bishop d6, this is just an example, white can get a really nice looking position. So that would have been a really, really good follow-up to knight e5 after c6. But instead, c takes d5 is played. Now this casts this in a very bad light, this knight e5 now, because it's moving a piece twice. And for what? After c takes, this makes sure there's a sill on the e4 move. If Nimzowitsch takes the other way with e takes, you'll notice that this bishop's hemmed in and still e4 becomes possible, and white should be fine here. So little subtleties are very, very important in this position. This move locks down e4, and also it does mean, this knight is a juicy looking target actually to a6 and b5. The natural outpost square c4 on this file, not a semi-open, it's a shared file, but that is a nice outpost square c4. So very, very interesting position. White seems to be misplaying it slightly. Bishop f4, a6, and Nimzowitsch described this as making preparation for the outpost square c4 with a6 and b5, rook c1 and b5 indeed. Now this looks like an awkward move. Move 12, Saemisch plays queen b3. There are better moves in this position, especially given this looks like a natural way to get an outpost, and it would be accelerated with a tempo gain. So why put the queen on b3? There must have been some very good reasons in Saemisch's mind, but it looks as though, for example, e3, I mean, this should be, you know, fairly okay. Nothing really too terrible for white. About even a4, trying to challenge this structure. This should be fine, even if the knight goes back to b1, as long as it's got d2 at some point. And the situations like this should be about even, or even knight b1 immediately is the curious like technical suggestions from the engines. And it should be a case that white is okay, actually. White should be okay in these variations. But queen b3 is kind of asking for it, you know, for a tempo gain. And Nimzowitsch does play knight c6 here. It's interesting. He describes this as a ghost, a noiseless, with noiseless steps, presses towards c4. So yeah, also tempo gaining steps, because the knight coming to a5 is with tempo to get to c4. It so happens chess is not that easy. Chess is a little bit annoying sometimes tactically. Actually, white did have a tactical shot here. You may have seen this game loads of times before. I wonder if you can spot an interesting tactical shot to consider here that white kind of missed. White played knight takes c6, which it seems absolutely correctly criticised, because white's just moved the knight a few times here just to exchange off one that's just moved once, and it also puts the bishop in a nice square. But white actually does have an interesting resource here. 100 points if you can guess it. And I think we should celebrate white's resources, because he plays it in such a way he has zero counterplay pretty soon. So this is while still the white position had some life to it. White did have, okay, 5 seconds more on stream. White did have knight takes d5. So this unveils an attack on c6. And if knight takes d4, knight takes e7 check, queen, say, goes to e3, and that's an even position. That should be an even position. That's on knight takes d4. If knight takes d5, then knight takes c6. White has an advantage. If knight takes e5, knight takes f6, and white has a big advantage there after bishop takes b7 and taking the rook. So yeah, knight takes d5 is probably the move to play here. But knight takes c6 is played, so white is just running himself out of counterplay here. You could you could say, well, Nimzowicz's talk about ghosts is also to do with frets. Sometimes the ghost of frets, and you see that quotation. I think that's kind of relevant for this game. The fret is stronger than the execution. But it's already getting a little bit difficult after queen b3. So, you know, this threat of knight a5 to c4, yeah, improves the black position. So knight takes c6 is the panicky move. Bishop takes. Sorry, improves the black position. Knight a5 to c4 would improve the black position. But white is kind of stuck here without the e4 break. h3 is played. This is the last chance for a tactic, though. There is a tactic in knight e4 to unveil an attack on c6. And if rook c8, then knight c5. And this should be still fine. But no, white plays actually h3, letting Nimzowitsch off the hook with this temporary tactical liability, the loose piece. Queen d7 protects that loose piece. Not only that, there's a nice battery for b4 and bishop a4 now on the cards, which could be dangerous. You know, sometimes bishop a4 could win in exchange if there's a rook on d1. We have king h2. White plays really passively here, king h2, with king h2. But it is difficult. You know, if he plays, say, a3, this kind of thing is really nice. It's just really nice. Black's going to be playing f5 and bishop d6. It's a ready-made attack on this side of the board. And if e4, that just shatters the white pawn structure. For example, like this, it's just horrendous structure. Just absolutely terrible. So white's already in getting a really passive position here after king h2. And Nimzowitsch plays knight h5. He says in his notes he could have supplied his opponent with a second ghost by playing queen b7 and then knight d7 to b6 to c4. So yeah, he could have done that, and again kind of adopted the threat is stronger in the execution. But you know, I have a feeling Nimzowitsch also likes attacking kings. So this one is to do with the king. The king's on h2. If this bishop can be dislodged and this bishop going to d6, we're really pointing at the king actually. Forget positional chess, we're just pointing at the king aggressively. So he had a preference for that as well. So the bishop does go back. f5, and there's already serious issues with the white position. White plays a very lame tactical threatening move, queen d1, as if to play e4 to attack the knight. Now, Nimzowitsch must have been really thinking his position's wonderful. He first kicks this knight back to a really terrible square, and then pins the e2 pawn. So White has to waste time now unpinning e2 if he wants to carry on with this idea of e4. But this is not that subtle now. You know, it's like the only threat White has in the position. So Nimzowitsch actually uncorks a really interesting idea. He plays actually bishop d6. He actually positively embraces, invites e4 from White. So e4, and the idea is not to play knight f6 because that runs into e5 and White will be winning there. No, the idea is to sacrifice the piece, to sacrifice the h5. It's for 2 pawns, and also we see an absolute pin of the bishop. We see also Black controlling the f file here and being able to double rooks. Not only that, given the pin piece, there's potential for rook f3 at some point for bishop g3. So there's a ton of prospects here, basically, in this position. It's immediately 2 pawns for the knight as well. So queen g5 was tried. On queen d1, then this is just a monstrous position anyway. For example, here, you know, if the king moves, bishop takes g3, what does White actually do here? If instead, you know, say this move, then bishop takes, the f1's controlled. What does White actually do? So anyway, queen g5, we have rook a f8, king h1. So the queen for the moment is protecting g3 now that the king's not protecting g3. We have this nudging move. The queen goes to e3, protecting g3 rather passively. If queen h4, by the way, that runs into bishop e7. And White would only be left with this tactic. Black could just win tons of material like this, for example. So queen e3. And now bishop d3. It means actually that this is just really terrible looking at the knight here. White is running out of moves. We have rook ce1. And and the thing is, the thing is, the queen might have been able to flee to b3, but this move cuts across that, so the queen can't even flee to b3. So after this move, also rook e2 is threatened to win the queen. So White's having to defend now against rook e2 to win the queen. So rook ce1, and Nimzowitsch plays a mockingly quiet move here. Can you guess? For 500 points. 10 seconds to pause the video. What does Black play here? An absolutely brilliant but quiet move, emphasizing the helplessness of the White position. And also, a killer threat, by the way, is amplified with this move. So can you guess? Okay, the move is h6. It actually does usefully stop the queen going to g5, and you might think, well, so what? The point is, Black has a big threat of rook f3. It's very difficult to parry to win the queen. And Saemisch really has had enough of his position. Nimzowitsch describes it as a brilliant move, announces the Zugzwang. White has not got a move left, e.g. king h2 or g4, then rook 5 to f3. And yeah, there's just pointless moves left. I mean, let's examine a few of them. If g4, then rook 5 to f3, and if bishop takes, there's rook h2 checkmate. That's not very good. If bishop f1, we just take that. Thanks very much. We're controlling f1. Yeah, if a3, let's try a3, a5. Let's follow this position here. There might be b3 if white really wants to play on. But we can just wait with king h7. And amusingly, you know, if bishop c1, then that cuts the rooks from b1. We can just take on b1. Yes, it is like a disastrous position. If h4, there's always the threat of this one as well, if black wants to pick up the queen. Black's kind of checkmating the queen here. If rook c1, if it neglects the weakness of the last move for e2, rook e2, winning the queen. So yeah, it's pretty hopeless stuff. So I'll just take you back to the final position, and let's just talk about it. There's been a bit of controversy calling this the Immortal Zugzwang game. So Raymond Keane describes it more as an extreme form of prophylaxis, because the opponent's possession is paralysed, and there is this killer threat. It's of black's, you know, move which is difficult to parry. The classic definition of Zugzwang is it's the person having to worsen their position because of the compulsion to move. You know, from that German derivation Zugzwang, compulsion to move. So it's not technically, in the purest technical sense, an actual Zugzwang. So that in itself has given, in my view, the game much greater fame as well because of this ongoing controversy. Soltis arguing it's not proper Zugzwang. Other people. So you can check out Wiki for the wider story there. Wolfgang Heidenfeld is one of the people who considers it a misnomer to call it a true Zugzwang. So there are objections to it being called actually a Zugzwang game. Yeah, I mean h6 did actually prepare a kind of killer threat basically. So it's of black's kind of activity, not white, so having to totally self-destruct. Now, interesting to me also, Nimzowitsch had a fantastic record against Saemisch. It's actually, if you check Chessgames.com, it's 9-1, 9-1 with one draw. It's quite the record Nimzowitsch had against Saemisch. Quite fascinating. I think maybe Saemisch was one of those players that Nimzowicz's positional style was really, really effective against, and he could see, you know, the tactical threat was mostly harmless, leaving with such a dominating position there, white completely tied up. So a fascinating game. And from the Queen's Engine, it was really played in a passive way though by white. But if you want to try the Queen's Engine, there's a free short and sweet course, kingscrusher.tv/free QID course, if you want to check that out. Okay, hope you enjoyed this. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.